Film is an art form which can accomplish the astonishing feat of inviting people to face their own dual nature and confront their capacity for both healing and harm. An accumulation of such stories provides steady reinforcement for critical inquiry, a demand to know why and how certain realities have come to be. And this state of questioning existing structures and systems of privilege and power, which dictate daily conditions, is the beginning of justice. You can see it in the actions of the subjects of many films, the drive to reveal, to recount, to witness. Film has the ability, like journalism, to inform us about injustice as it is lived. And it has the power, like great art, to trigger the imagination and demand articulation. At its best, film is both informational and transformational. It is the modern era's most powerful example of using storytelling, which is the basic mechanism through which humans resolve the ongoing tension between our best and worst acts. Storytelling is how we move forward from the paralysis that deep contradiction can hold us in. And this dual power of film is why Ford has seen film as a key ingredient in its continuing work towards dignity and democracy. Seeing film and justice as intertwined is a hallmark of Ford Foundation's commitment to human dignity. For over 50 years, it has supported essential stories and new modes of storytelling that remind us how dignity feels and what the road to it feels like. Their impact can be seen in the way that they have become touchstones for eras in movement, a shorthand for entire historical events, a way of understanding history that has been transformed by the film themselves. We are now in a position to identify, strengthen, and connect a global North and global South network of social justice storytellers and organizations that support this content and raise the visibility of the values of social justice storytelling around the world. So we continue to focus on long-form nonfiction, but are now embracing a spectrum of moving image approaches, including web-based and virtual reality storytelling, because our artists are leading us there. We are prioritizing collaborative capacity for the organizations and networks we fund and building a pipeline of inclusive talent and leadership, that is the producers, curators, critics, and executives who support the artists. They are building resources for safety and security of artists, subjects, and information. So they think it's going to make a difference. We know that if you succeed in denying someone culturally, they have less value economically and politically. Once devalued, those in power can place legal barriers to opportunities of all kinds on them in their communities and maintain them with narratives that reinforce these structures. So in closing, film as an act of justice strives to reverse that process. We envision a socially engaged film practice which equalizes and liberates rather than privileging voices that isolate and constrain. We are working to bring Global South stories and artists to the fore, and Global South leadership to the tables of power, where representation in moving image production and distribution is decided. And so by investing in networking, this storytelling and leadership talent, we are building a dynamic, generative social justice film ecology, capable of leading the field into a decade where these stories are necessary and demanded. Right on, Kara. So that's where Ford's at, all right? Just take that all in. Luckily, we have these women up here to help make some of this lofty and aspirational language real into what their programs are about, what they're thinking about, and we want to make it interactive from the beginning. So they're each going to talk really briefly, and then we're going to open it up for an interactive discussion. So hold on to those questions. There are no wrong questions, no bad questions. We're just going to dive into it. Now I'm going to go sit down with the people. Okay, first up, Lauren Pabst, please.
Thank you, Wendy. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me? Great. I just want to say that I'm really honored and really humbled to be here representing the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. And I'm very grateful to have been here in this space with this community for the last couple of days. And have the opportunity to talk about the way MacArthur approaches funding journalism and media, with the understanding that sometimes foundations can seem very inaccessible and very nebulous and a little bit maybe not as transparent as we might be able to be. So I'm happy to just give you a little more information about some of the changes at MacArthur over the last several months and how we see a role for us in supporting this very dynamic and very critical field going forward. My name is Lauren Pabst. I'm a program officer in the Journalism and Media program. the MacArthur Foundation as a whole has been going through a process of really looking again at the programs in which it supports, asking whether there is something particular about the areas in which the foundation's been focused, that in which MacArthur really brings something unique to the table and really belongs and has a role to play in perhaps a larger role than in previously going forward. And as part of that process, we had the opportunity to look again at the journalism and media funding at MacArthur, which has been one of the longest areas of support at MacArthur, dating back to the early 80s. And this, it previously would manifest in our support of nonprofit news, documentary film, and we had the opportunity last month to relaunch this program officially, share this work that we've been doing with the world, and now in many ways put a framework out into the field that we can now start really making real for the folks that are doing the work. And that framework has 3 parts, and it's rooted in much of what's always driven the MacArthur Foundation's support of journalism and media. Those 3 parts are first, what we call professional reporting, support of nonprofit newsrooms, mostly engaged in investigative reporting and international reporting. The second area we're calling nonfiction multimedia storytelling, which will encompass our support of documentary, inclusive of long form, but also looking more at new media, short form, digital content. And the third area is a very new area for us, which we're calling civic media, participatory civic media, the use of media by individuals and groups to organize for social change. And in those 3 areas, we're also looking very intently at the way in which they overlap and intersect, because there's a great deal of work that sits at the intersection of all 3, of one or more, and this community knows that better than anyone. And so I wanted to also just very tactically address part of what was part of this shift into a new enduring commitment that the MacArthur Foundation has made to this field, which some of you may know was the decision to discontinue the MacArthur Foundation's open call for individual documentary projects. And I wanted to give you a very quick background into what led to that decision. Ever since the early 80s, MacArthur would support individual documentary films and would do so on kind of a rolling basis as they came in. And my colleague Kathy Im, who directs the journalism and media program at MacArthur, in about 2010, she led the way in changing the way in which that was done. And rather than just saying, send us your projects and we'll get back to you, she created a designed and open call process where we would have one deadline a year, and we would receive all of the projects, and the goal and make the decisions from there. And the goal of that was really to move beyond the usual suspects that we found coming to us again and again and being successful at MacArthur again and again, specifically to try to diversify the set of filmmakers that we worked with. And so for the last 5 years, I've had the honor and the privilege to be able to work with those individual documentary filmmakers, with those projects, and it's really been an honor to work in that way. With the decision to move away from support of direct support of documentary films, it is not because we're moving away from the field. It's not because we don't know that support is needed more than ever, but we're able to now look at a new era of the MacArthur Foundation's work in this field, which is going to be doing that work through organizational partners. We have partners already that include ITVS, American Documentary POV, Firelight Media, Sundance, Tribeca, Cartemquin, and we hope to add to that list with the goal of providing more support for filmmakers through these organizations that do this work 24/7, that are located around the country, that know these filmmakers very well, and provide the direct financial support that independents need to make their films a reality, but also provide the creative support and the more hands-on experiences and mentorship and help that is also very important in the success of a film. So that's just a little bit more about what we're looking towards in the future and kind of how we got here. And I'll turn it over to my colleagues now. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Sandy Herz. I'm the Director of Global Partnerships at the Skoll Foundation. And ours is not so much a story about what's different as much as it is about an evolution. And so I thought I would take this time to talk about sort of what's the same and what's different. I've been with Skoll for about 12 years. And there are certain aspects that have been constant throughout. For example, we remain completely committed to social entrepreneurs as those individuals capable of making a large-scale impact on the world's most pressing problems. But we also remain completely committed to storytelling and the importance of storytellers and storytelling in helping to make vivid the problems such that change can happen. People can realize what's possible. But we've evolved at the same time in are thinking about how best to sort of apply those two ideas. And I'm assuming most of you are familiar with Skoll. I'll do a quick show of hands. How many of you are familiar with the Skoll Foundation? Yeah, so that's most of you. So lots of information on our website. Happy to talk to folks afterwards who'd like more information. But I think the key thing that's been true probably for 5 or 6 years now is that we haven't really been about the social entrepreneur as sort of the hero and that heroic journey. We used to have the tagline, uncommon people, common good. And there was this impression, I think, out in the world that we were about the social entrepreneur as this amazing person who was going to go out and single-handedly change the world. And I don't think we ever really believed that, but I think we're much more explicit now that we're not about the individual heroic journey so much as we're about equilibrium change, which is kind of a jargony term that means shifting the status quo. So there's a lot of entrenched status quos out there now that are not great, that are leading to long-term poverty, systems that are hard to shift, that sort of keep people in poverty, perpetuate Jim Crow, lead to environmental degradation, some would say Armageddon. And we need to do something about those. We need to break those up. And we see social entrepreneurs as the catalysts who can do that, who can break up the status quo such that people start to be able to think, wait, it doesn't have to be that way. It could be different. And the social entrepreneur kind of paints a picture of the way that it could shift, the way that their innovation could play a role in shifting that equilibrium. And so the social entrepreneur remains central, but changing the world as a team sport is often something that Jeff Skoll likes to say. And it's going to take everybody to make that happen. And so it's going to mean we need researchers, academics to do more research. We need business people to build these ideas into their supply chains and into their markets. We need activists to advocate and to agitate for that change. We need policymakers to change policy to enable those changes to happen. And we need storytellers. And storytellers are critical to our ability to be successful, because storytellers can make vivid both the problems as they are today and the solutions, the world as it could be. And without that, people can't make that leap. They can't imagine the world as it could be, that new status quo that we're trying to get to. So we end up stuck and we slide back into the way things have always been. And social entrepreneurs and all of us are not going to be successful in getting to a sustainable world of peace and prosperity without storytellers as the people who can not only help people to see it, but help people to care, to feel moved, and to be in a position where they can shift, not to be so caught up in that entrenched reality. And then the other thing that has always been true and kind of grows out of this, but is even more so now, is the importance of partnerships. So we used to, when we talked about our community, mean the community of social entrepreneurs. If you go and look on our website now under community, you'll see the social entrepreneurs, but you'll also see partners. And a major part of that partnership is our storytelling partners. So Sundance Stories of Change is a major one of those, and the initial way that we have engaged with the filmmaker community. That started in 2005 on a pilot basis, and for real in 2007 when Kara was at Sundance and kind of got it started, and now really ably led by Tabitha and by Rick. And that is where we bring together the worlds of filmmakers with the world of social entrepreneurs so that they can interact with each other and find areas of common interest. But we have no desire to dictate what the artist's vision should be or what the content of the project should be. We're just looking for those collaborations, those areas of mutual interest, and then find ways to get behind those, and then just create an ecosystem of other funders, of partners, of distributors who can help to make those projects successful, make you successful. So we have a whole portfolio with Stories of Change as a flagship kind of at the center of it, but we also have book partnerships for publishing, we have journalism partnerships, and so there are a number of different ways that we're thinking about storytelling. And then more broadly, partnership is a critical part of how Skoll is operating overall, and that's why my title now is Director of Global Partnerships, and not just sort of a storytelling kind of a title. In order for that to be successful, in order for us to do this, to have storytelling really matter, to have that kind of effect in the world, we have to elevate the voice of the artist on the global stage. People have to know that what you are doing matters and can have this catalytic role together with the social entrepreneurs in making change happen and getting us to that more sustainable world of peace and prosperity. So we really see storytelling as part of our DNA. We see your work as critical to our work. If you ever go to the Skoll World Forum, you will see storytelling featured in really prominent ways throughout. And it's not just a placeholder here and there, and that's something that wasn't true 10 years ago, or 10 years ago, and seems to be even more so every year. So I welcome this conversation. I think the work that you all are doing is incredibly important, and I want to make sure that you all see yourselves in our mission and in our work the way that we do. Because yes, we may say that social entrepreneurs are at the center, but it won't happen without you. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erica Deiparine-Sugars. I'm the Managing Director of Programming and Production at ITVS. And it's great to be in front of you because ITVS has been born out of the efforts of you all, actually. 25 years ago, efforts from independent artists, independent producers, organizations, artist organizations, and NGOs actually fought for the creation of an entity like ITVS to foster diversity, plurality, and innovation in public media. So this is a very appropriate place for us to be connected to and continue to support. Again, 25 years ago, we were known mostly for funding of independent documentaries on public television and have really sort of evolved over those years into kind of a co-production entity. And also we have engagement arms within ITVS to help not only bring this really vital, important, these stories to public media, but also engage on local levels and in many ways with public media audiences. Our major funding does come from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, so we work with public dollars to give to independent documentary filmmakers to finish these films. But the idea, and I sit in a very unique spot here, it's very specific to public media and public media's mission, which is a little different from my colleagues sitting here. But while we have a narrow focus in that our mandate is actually to bring these stories to public media, I think we all very much are doing the same thing, which is amplifying voices that don't normally get heard or seen in any mediascape. And that mission, particularly on the bringing diversity and plurality, is more important than ever in this day, 25 years later. And so that's why we still exist. And we do it in a number of different ways, and those have evolved, as I've said. But the largest way we do that is through public broadcasting. Television is not dead, but we know that there are other ways for people to engage with the media, and we have to help and support our public media partners to walk in those directions. All of our films do get a public broadcast, and you can get more than 1 million eyeballs on a piece of content, and that's important. Because this is, again, having a free and open public media is super important for our democracy, so that everyone has access to it, and everyone's stories can be told and seen and not found behind a paywall. So we feel like our vital mission is to continue to support and grow public media, but also help producers get these stories into other hands of other communities that really want it or can use it. So we've just recently worked with what we call a digital open call, which is actually working with producers to create short series for multi-platform distribution. We've also have an OV player that was funded by generous support from CPB, which is really kind of our first piece of technology, was just taking what we did on the ground with community cinema, taking films and put them in the hands of the communities to start what we want to do is conversations at the community level and perpetuate those change through that way. So the OV player is available for free for every public media organization, working with independent organizations as well to use and access this this platform. Also, with generous support from MacArthur Foundation, have built partnerships with journalism outlets through Independent Lens, our series on public television. Independent Lens now works with what they call IL digital partnerships, and so working with outlets like the New York Times and Upworthy to use the content that we have available to us and really make it broadly used within, particularly with this very timely issues, to repurpose the content, have filmmakers come and engage in a more journalistic way with their pieces of content to connect to things that are happening every day. So that's something that we've been working on in this last year. But I think, again, like my colleagues, limited funding is always an issue for us, and things like an open call, which I know people here will groan about, but I know a lot of you who've gone through the process, we've refined over many years and continue to take the feedback from producers to say what makes sense, but also we're stewards of public money. And what we want to make sure is that we keep the standards high and don't become a target for people to take this money away from the hands of you all. Because really, we're just the pass-through in terms of that money. And so public dollars are important and also scarce, but the fact that we are allowed to work with producers to get these stories made, we take very seriously. And so there are the way that we can distribute it, the widest way we can distribute it, and also not to feel like we're funding the most usual suspects, is to have an open call process, which we do have twice a year. And it's very open. There's a peer review, which recently we did a survey of all our producers who've come to us, and one, having their content accessible to the public was rated like very, very high. It was the first thing that was rated, that the fact that they could get their content into the hands of the widest public available was important, and two, that there was an open process where they felt like they had an equal chance as somebody who's probably won Academy Awards or Emmy Awards, that they too at any level of their career can come in and actually have somebody look at their proposal and take it and consider it seriously. And then giving feedback, which I know there are always mixed results about feedback, but we continue to say that we do it because we don't want to put people through horrible experiences. We do it because people keep wanting it, and they feel like they can be heard from the funder, or through a process that's not a blind process where they throw their application and not hear anything. And it takes a lot of time and resources. Believe me, my team takes it very seriously. It's not always perfect, and guiding people to give us really constructive feedback is a hard thing. But we find it continues to be useful to our field, and so we will continue to do it. But I think the other things outside of that, 25 years later, diversity of voices and experiences is still crucial to our society, and I think that's why we continue to find different ways post-broadcast, outside of broadcast, but even within broadcast, to find new talent, new producers, new stories, different ways to tell stories that we can try to push into the public sphere. I think that's probably all I have to say now. Thanks.
Hello. I'm Sheila Leddy, Executive Director of the Fledgling Fund. And first, I just want to thank you, Wendy, and your team for this conference. It's just been great, and I think as a funder, sometimes you do the funder panel because you want to, give artists access to funders and to be able to say hello. And I just love the proximity and the access to the artists, because sometimes we're seeing kind of proposals come in over our desks, but to actually be in the room and to hear what you're struggling with and working and thinking about every day is just so valuable to me as I do my work. So thank you for creating this kind of forum. Just a quick show of hands. How many people here know the Fledgling Fund and what we do? So quite a bit, okay. So Fledgling started just over 10 years ago, and we are, we're a small family foundation. So relative to some of the other funders, we're really small. So we had to think carefully about where we were going to put our resources. And we really, when it started, we didn't go in and say, we want to fund film. We were really about funding social change. And we came from an academic space dealing with sometimes social entrepreneurship. The founder, Diana, taught social enterprise at Harvard Business School and spent many years at the School of Public Health. So really looking at entrenched social problems and just seeing the frustration of not seeing those things move. And one of the reasons was we weren't seeing stories. We were seeing stories, but then we were like, but why aren't these stories being used? Why aren't people seeing them? So pretty quickly, we came to this position of really focusing Fledgling's resources on storytelling as a vehicle for social change and really looking at those films that really had the power to move people to action. So we're not, not every documentary film or every story should be or is a fit for Fledgling, but we're looking for those that can use some support to really push this idea of kind of audience engagement and community engagement around story. So that's kind of our sweet spot kind of in the field, is really this story for social change. So you can check out our website and you can see all of the amazing stories and projects that we've funded over the past 10 years. And I think when I look at that, I'm just in awe of the artists who have kind of made those stories and put them to work in the world. And I'm really proud that we've been able to play a small role in some of that. The kinds of grants we give as a small foundation, we look at how we can leverage both our resources as well as kind of bring added value beyond that. So sometimes that is in our kind of open call, which is open call, it is rolling. We're looking at a story, say, like at the rough cut stage, but we're looking for those stories where we can kind of provide that small grant that kind of gets you to the next level. Perhaps it's that planning grant, perhaps it's this amazing opportunity you have, you know what you want to do, but you just need that little bit of funding. And that's, Fledgling kind of feels like, as a small foundation, we have the benefit of being small and being able to turn something around quickly. So that's kind of one of the things we look at as well, like how can we make sure that we can look at kind of being a small family foundation as a disadvantage because we can't write a big, huge grant. But then I say, but there's an advantage sometimes in being able to do a quick turnaround. So we do kind of look at that piece of it. So we have our open call. The other piece that we have that I'm really proud of is an engagement lab that my colleague Emily Varellin directs. And that is, again, through this notion of kind of not only positioning these films and stories to kind of go to work in the world, but also saying how can we create kind of a community of support and collaboration among our grantees. So we bring together a kind of group of 8 project teams for kind of a year-long mentoring kind of programming to really help them kind of plan and activate their films for social change. And that's been terrific, not only in just the kind of the films that are kind of, you can look at those on the website, they're amazing, they're doing amazing work, but again, for us as funders to get to know kind of what the challenges are, and then we feel like we can help kind of share that with our other grantees, and to create that kind of community and convening space so that this kind of independent filmmaking isn't so independent. So it's that kind of lab model, but kind of over the course of a year. And then the other piece, and as I was listening to Kara's kind of missive, which was, I was kind of like, I'm so glad I'm at the end and not directly following. Sorry, Lauren. It is so aspirational and inspiring. And, part of it is her saying, we're following the artists. And in many ways, Fledgling does that as well. And we have launched kind of a new initiative it's called Emerging Forms of Storytelling. And again, it's thinking about what can we learn, what have we learned over the last 10 years of working on kind of outreach and community engagement, and how can we think about that in relation to these new forms of storytelling that we're seeing, things like the Oakland Fence, which I'm proud to say is kind of part of that initiative. Some of the VR projects, Collisions was a project that we funded. And again, thinking about how can we use these new forms of storytelling for social change and kind of embed them in the movements on the ground. So that is kind of how we work. That's kind of our way of kind of saying, how can we support filmmakers and storytellers in the most effective way that kind of takes advantage of what we can give beyond financial support. So it's kind of that financial linked with some in-kind. And you can check out our website. We try and share resources when we see a need in the field. There's case studies there. And I invite you to kind of dig into the projects because they are kind of amazing.
So much. I am so taken with how much love and respect and conviction there is about this work coming from here out there. And I hope you guys can feel that. I know sometimes there's tension-filled conversations between funders and filmmakers, and that sense of scarcity and a sense of, oh, why isn't my project being funded or my organization? But it's this grappling for few funds. And I think we started out this conference in a love place, and it's really nice to sort of feel just that openness and sense of respect from you guys. So thank you for bringing that. Before I start with questions and we start asking each other questions, I'm opening it up. Mary, are you here with the mic? Mary's got the mic.
Hello.
Let's hear from you all. Right down here, Mary, and then you can just walk around. Let us know who you are before you ask your question, please.
Hi, Wendy.
Hey.
My name is Fiza. I have a new media company based out of Oakland called The Third Space. My question for you all, and I always wonder about this whenever I'm confronted with a grant, is because I don't, my kind of unapologetic blackness doesn't always fit in the neat confines of buzzworthy language that funders fund. So I wonder how you all think about an inclusive process, how you guys think about the way your applications are framed, and beyond having webinars that illuminate the funding process, what is it that you guys do to think about inclusion within the funding process?
What a great question. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone want to dive in?
I can just quickly say,
Please.
From our perspective, it's not so much guidelines driven and top down as it is sort of generative and bottom up. So our portfolio includes, among other people, Brian Stevenson from the Equal Justice Initiative. And so there were a number of conversations at the Skull World Forum this year with him. And there's a project that may emerge out of that, and other projects that are happening. And so to me, it's the diversity within our portfolio matching up with the diversity within the filmmaker community that's going to result in a diverse set of projects and story ideas that we can carry forward. So that's where the diversity comes from.
And I actually also think, just to add a little bit of something, I think the onus in a lot of ways, I've worked with a lot of folks who are doing very good work in communities and don't feel that they have access even to apply for funding. It's just not, you don't learn in high school or even college that there's money available, there are grants available, that you might be eligible for this kind of funding, and it's that you don't speak the grant language. It took me a long time to learn to speak the grant language, and I went intentionally after it because I was a privileged young white woman from New York who went to Oberlin and came out here to learn how to write grants right away. And I know a lot of people don't get that experience, and I think the onus is on organizations like NAMAC and BAVAC and those middle-range community art service organizations that could do a better job at reaching out to those who aren't traditionally funded and who might not even understand what the resources are that are available. And let's do some more collaborative resource sharing and help get projects ready for funding. Because it's something that I think you just assume we'll just go write a grant. And it just doesn't really happen that way. And your question actually gave me an idea of wow, I know ITVS does a lot of outreach into the community for diverse voices. But even though if you do that, the ITVS application form is really hard. People get rejected 4 times and then get funded. And you need a lot of time and and I think we can do better as a community to support this process. The onus is not just here, but it's on the NAMAC style organizations and others who could maybe help that process as well. Anyone else want to speak to that?
Because my process is so burdensome, and I'm just kidding. I think what we've learned over the past is which is how do you make a more open application and get the information we need, but actually have your storytelling, your idea shine in the application, and less about whether you check the right boxes or not. It is a process, because we have a lot of people who want, we have an open process and a peer review process, which we think is also adds to the diversity of the kinds of projects that resonate and rise to the surface. So there's a lot more mechanics that are involved on our side, but what I do appreciate is the feedback, and we do take that and try to figure out, we're actually tweaking our application right now again, because of the inclusion. How can we have people really have their stories lead us to funding them, and less about, again, the qualifications of that funding? Second, I would just have to say a group of funders have come together to really think about the application process, one of many things that they're talking about, but for like the lower hanging fruit, it's just like, can we just ask for similar things? So you don't have to keep, we got to tweak this for this funder, and they asked for a 7-minute reel, and I only have a 10-minute reel, and I got to cut it down. And so that's happening based on a lot of what we hear in the field, which is it's too much, it's expense, it's time, but having to know what each funder is very different though, and their objectives and their mission of what they want to fund is different. So having that understood, you may tweak the language a little to show how maybe this is much more social justice focused than something else. But outside of that, there are ways that funders are coming together to make it easier, hopefully.
I just want to say that I appreciate the question. Thank you for that. And that is part of the reason that MacArthur, that's one of the reasons that we are working in a different way to support documentary projects, nonfiction, multimedia projects through partner organizations, that with an eye towards trying to seed, to resource organizations that already work with diversity and inclusion and the insight that comes from communities of color and underrepresented communities as part of their mandate, and then also potentially help other organizations to think more closely about that in the way that they provide resources to projects and to organizations. So that's a big part of what our next task is in terms of the way we're approaching this funding.
Thanks, Faisal. Really appreciate it. Others? Mir, you've got a taker.
Hi, thank you so much. This has been very helpful. I have like 2 pages of notes. My question is...
Donnie, can you say who you are so people know?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm Donnie. I'm the executive director of Donda's House. We do artist development with young people in Chicago. And I'm also, Wendy has been mentioning me over the weekend, but I'm a new 2016 creative leader as well. Super excited about that. My question is, I know that many of you guys are spending time in the field just with, perhaps with site visits and with some of your grantees. And I'm really interested in, without like sacrificing their IP, what are some of the ways that your grantees are exploring sustainability? So whether that's through partnerships or hybrid models, non-grant funding, like what are you seeing and what are you excited about in the field?
Great question. Sustainability? Lauren, you got an idea? Please.
That's the big question, of course. I will say that MacArthur is a big believer in, this is not really answering your question yet, but a big believer in the importance of general operating support. And we know a lot of nonprofits rely on project support. They're well positioned to get project support. Funders have great reasons for providing project support, but we're trying to make the statement that of the trust that really comes with providing general operating support. Specifically, I'm thinking about our nonprofit news grantees that rely on that. In terms of sustainability of income, I've seen a lot of organizations that we help support work on individual giving as a way of getting small donations that can all add up, and then they find that there's an added benefit of getting to know the people in their community better by having relationships with them that could turn into donations or might not. And then a lot of organizations are working with events as ways of raising funds. Collaboration is also a big trend in the field. It's not always a savings. It's usually, we know that 2 organizations doesn't mean it costs half as much. Sometimes it costs more to work together. But being connected in that way can help with figuring out how to approach that question of staying, being able to keep going and doing the important work. So I hope that's helpful. I'm not very specific. But.
Did you have something?
I just wanted to add, too, we don't do a lot of organizational support where we are supporting primarily kind of project-based work. But one of the things we work with in the lab is working with filmmakers, particularly on the engagement side. A lot of times, filmmakers don't even necessarily write themselves into the budget when they're thinking about it. And even if at some point you think you might be doing some of this kind of in-kind, you need to kind of write yourself in and value yourself. So I just kind of put that out there to kind of just make sure it's in there, because if it's not in there, then, if it's not asked for, then you think, oh, we can give, this grant and that's great, it's all covered. But so I think being really specific about what the full cost of it is helpful for funders as we think about budgeting. And I know, I wish that we could give larger grants than we do, but I do think it's important at some level for artists to kind of ask as well and to value.
Yeah, and the one thing I wanted to add here, too, I think it's a great question. Donnie, thanks for bringing it into the room. There's a funder in the Bay Area, Creative Work Fund, out of the Haas Foundation, that makes an intentional effort to fund collaborations through a project at Creative Work Fund. And what it does is it enables a nonprofit and an artist to do a proposal together, and it's fully together. When I was at BAVAC, we did one with wonderful sound artist, and you have to show a completely split budget that has some built-in sustainability, so that you're going to do this project and then you're going to be able to carry on the work just a little bit. It's not a huge grant, but it's making an acknowledgement towards that a collaboration here could help both organizations around sustainability. And another foundation that was supposed to be here this weekend that had to cancel last minute is Creative Capital. Out of New York, and Lisa Dent was going to be here, and there's a funding model at Creative Capital where they really help oversee the life cycle of a project, knowing, like nonprofit organizations have life cycles, that you need an influx of money at first for development, and then they help you and lab you up in the summertime, and then when the project has needs, they are often there for you again through as the project comes to fruition. And it's a very interesting, I love getting MacArthur funding, because you write a grant and then they talk to you and then they give you a grant and then they give you a check for the full amount, and there you go. And you really have to manage your own project. So the sustainability the question of sustainability comes back to the artist, and how can you use that investment? And this would go from any foundation. Others want to give you expenses, or they want to say, let's do a match. That helps sustainability. I think there's a lot that artists can do to come forward with kind of creating models in our practice and then sharing those with funders. It's the same thing as, how do you know when your project makes a difference in the world? What data points are you measuring? How do you know that? That's nothing, the funders can't tell you how you know that. It's almost like you have to tell them. It's like, this is how we're measuring success. What do you think about this? And the more we have those kind of conversations, I think the more sustainable our projects will be and our organizations will be. So I also want to acknowledge there's individual artists out here as well as leaders of organizations. We're a very mixed and integrated group. So that's why we want to know who you are and from what perspective your question's coming. So are there more? Let's keep it moving. Yeah, you have a bunch more, Mayor. Just keep getting around. And then there's one down here too.
Hi, I'm Mark. Thanks for the awesome panel. I was just curious, as filmmakers and artists and activists are being I think rightfully so pushed to kind of be more intentional about how their work is sort of exhibited and shared and disseminated. As we're being asked basically to do more with our work, which requires basically when people ask what I do, I kind of do creative event planning, which doesn't sound very sexy, but it just basically means a lot of emailing all the time and organizing. And I guess my question is just as we're asked to do more work, which I think is good. Is the funding sort of also reflecting that? And if so, how are you sort of identifying the totality of the work that's needed and to equitably fund that?
And I will say that's kind of where Fledgling focuses its funding on that. If we're asking folks to use their fund, their work for social change, that's kind of the piece that we fund. So we don't fund, as a rule, production or even post-production anymore. We very much are focused on that piece of kind of planning and implementation around the community engagement. So that's where we have focused our resources. And that's why we have an open call as well. And when someone was talking about kind of the inclusive piece of it, I think that's why we have an open call for our pieces, making sure that we're not just funding the projects that we know and the artists that we know over and over again, but really looking for those projects to come through over the transom in many ways.
So when we first launched the Stories of Change partnership, we had a $1.2 million call for projects, and we asked people to project the whole of the budget through the outreach and the impact efforts, and it was milestone driven, so that you've got that funding when you got to that point. At this point, we think more. And I'm happy for Rick to talk about this too, because he's more as kind of the hands-on guy from a Sundance perspective. But we're funding a lot of different things, different projects that are emerging out of these collaborations. And then we're seeing where the momentum is and where it goes. And so Collisions is a great example of a project that we started off just to kind of see what could happen. Could we get something to WEF in time, to the World Economic Forum? And then there was so much interest, and so it came to the Skoll World Forum. It's, Nicole got on a plane yesterday afternoon to go to Vienna to work on non-proliferation conference. And so one of the first questions I asked of her and Lynette, the director, was, how are you guys surviving? What are you doing? How do you go from here? And I feel like the key from my perspective is not so much to make sure it's built in from the beginning on every project, because not every project will get to that point and have the same momentum, but when it does, to be ready to double down, because otherwise you're never going to get to the impact. And I really appreciated yesterday in Tabitha's remark the talk about moving from support for the arts to support for the artist. And I think that that's very much on my mind as well, is sort of what's the sustainability of the project, but also what's the sustainability of the artist and that person so that they can continue that work.
More, please, Mary. We've got, I think Pam had something and Amir had something. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Pamela Yates from Skylight. I have a mantra that I try to help guide my work within the film community, which is more community and less competition. And, one of the main things that drives competition among documentary filmmakers is funding. So I'm wondering, from a funder's perspective, if you've thought about how you too can help attenuate the competition.
That's a good question. How do we? Lauren, do you know how? Tell us. Let's do it.
I love that. I think that's such an important point. I can tell you what that brings up to mind for me, which is the movement in the last decade or so of creating these cohorts of artists that are on a journey together with their projects, can provide support for one another, are matched up with mentors that might have more experience in the field. And I think that kind of it's going to when it comes to funding, of course, it's going to be, there's always a competitive element to it. But I think that in that way, we're certainly thinking more about the way that kind of model can function in helping films move forward and get done and finished and be successful in what they're trying to do. So that's what that made me think of. And I was going to say something else and it flew away from my mind. But yeah, I totally share that idea that's a challenge. So.
I think the kind of the cohort lab model, that's one of the reasons why we started the engagement lab, so we could kind of create a safe space where folks had some assurance of at least some kind of early funding from fledgling, so that they were all kind of grantees. But then and then that would allow them to kind of collaborate and share. But fundamentally, as I think about it, it was they had to apply to get in, so there's a competition, and so, at some level, there's limited resources, so it is what it is. And I think kind of to create those safe spaces where people can share what they're learning. I mean, that's one of the things that I think Emily does brilliantly in the engagement lab, is saying, we're taking off our funder hat right now, and this just is kind of a safe space to kind of learn and engage and support one another. But it's really hard to find those spaces. And I think as funders, we have to do our best to try and to create those spaces and convenings. But fundamentally, there's limited resources too, so I think there's always going to be an element of competition.
That's right.
So for what it's worth, we're working a very particular slice, right? This engagement between social entrepreneurs and filmmakers and the potential to drive impact. But we're doing it very much from a bottom-up perspective. So we're not doing an open call and saying, sort of, here are the parameters, everybody give us your best shot, and then we're going to pick the 5 best. We're cultivating a community as the base of these people with this common shared interests that are coming from different places. And then out of that community is coming ideas, and then we're funding those ideas not in a competitive way, but kind of as the ideas where the artist is really excited about it and wants to carry it forward, and we feel like the social entrepreneur has the capability to deliver on the impact side of it, then we give it a little money. We don't sort of make a big bet. We make a small bet, and we see what happens, and we try and sort of move it forward. So I think it's probably the least competitive, understanding that there's always an aspect, perhaps, of competition for funding. But I think coming out of a community model really helps.
And I just add that I think, again, with the limited resources, I mean, we've toyed with ideas of, do you place, a lot of big bets, fewer big bets, to give completion funding to producers so they can actually get it done and stop having to fundraise? Or do you have a lot of small bets and again, cause another issue within the field, which is then they're scrambling to try to figure out where the rest of the money comes from? So, I mean, I think that's the balance we're always trying to make, but I think it is important to talk about the community in which you're kind of engaging with, and have them understand what your intent is to not cause, people to try to prove that they're the best person that you could press your bet in, but it's just about what our mission is and what we're looking for, which is really diversity and diversifying the conversation that's out in the marketplace. While your project may be really important, there's another perspective that's not being told. It doesn't make you less worthy to get the funds, but at this moment, that particular voice needs to be heard. And having an open process helps us find out what those stories are, and also engaging with a wider selection panel of peers. And it's just not me sitting there reading every film proposal, thank goodness, but also, I think that I have one perspective, and having many people come out and say, actually, we don't hear enough about this, and people agree, that's the thing that helps keep it more open. And you can apply again. Not that that's helpful to hear for some people, but you can. It's not like, okay, we've seen you once, we don't want to see it again. And then development funding, which is another issue. I think the field knows that, we want to place a lot of small bets too, to see how producers who can develop and find their voice, and from new producers to veteran producers. I think development funding is scarce in our field, and being able to have the privilege of our organization having that support of CPB to continue the Diversity Development Fund is really vital. And then we do connect those kind of classes of people together, and they actually find help amongst each other and build a community.
Thank you so much. Question, Pam. We'll go to Amir, and then there's Sue in the back, and then a few more over there. So.
Hi, I'm Amir Soltani, a producer and co-director of Dogtown Redemption. I'm going to ask a Wendy question for you. So,
are you asking a Wendy question to the panel, or are you asking
a Wendy question
to me?
To the panel?
Oh,
but
okay. Can't wait for this. What's a Wendy question?
We'll see. So, each of us work remotely, and in a way for instance, we worked on homelessness in Oakland, and telling the story of people who are picking garbage, making $10. But the city of Oakland has $1 billion garbage contract that it hands out. So the question I have is, as artists and funders who have a similar concern here, how do we connect to increase funding across the board? Because what we're doing is we're taking on black holes that are caused often by government failures and so on. How do we double ITVS's budget? How do we bring other billionaires into the game? How do we use this power here to raise the game in our own behalf? Who's our political lobby?
That is kind of a windy question. Suggestions? Because I'll do it. You know I'll do it.
Can I jump in? Yeah. So we think a lot at Skoll about how to bring other people's into the game and other players into the game. We have this sort of ecosystem view of social change. And again, the artist as kind of and the storyteller as the catalyst within that with the social entrepreneur to help make it vivid for people. So I actually have a colleague whose entire job is to find other funders who maybe haven't decided yet what their philanthropy is going to be or are already moving in our direction, and we can fast track them by helping them along. And that's what he does full time, is figure out how to get them to invest in an aligned way. And we're thinking a lot about how do we engage with government, how do we engage. It's hard to get down to the level of that money for garbage that's in Oakland. Because we don't have an issue-specific kind of a lens to enable us to get that pinpointed. But I think we are very much thinking in those terms, and I would love ideas on how we could do more of that.
We need to do a video roundtable on this idea. Let's just get the energy around it and bring some people together, because I think you're onto something there, Amir. Thank you so much. Let's go back to Sue, and then come back this way. We have time for a few more questions.
Hi, thank you. So I have an observation and, a question for the panel. So I run a network. I think I've worked with a number of you. AIR, which has its roots in audio. We come from radio. We're a 28-year-old organization. And over the last year, we've put a lot of effort for about 8 years into recruiting new producers and creating a new network of media makers. So over the last year, we've had this unprecedented growth, 81% increase in new producers joining our network, which is a very engaged, living entity of people who are solving each other's problems and putting together collaborative efforts, et cetera, et cetera. What we know is, of this group that has come in, 30% of them are of color, and there's a huge spurt and those who identify as multimedia producers. So we're seeing a real trend in that direction. Filmmakers, audio producers, using every tool at their disposal to tell a story. You know, Jennifer Brandel, who's one of our producers in Chicago, says, there are just so many ways to tell a story. So I guess one question I would have is there incentive, and the other thing I would add is, the outcomes we're seeing with the work, these are people who are, yes, social entrepreneurs who are passionate about public service media. Like most of the people in this room, they want to make a difference and contribute to the greater good. To what degree do you see any shift or flexibility, or to what degree are you adapting to be able to support those who are working in a multimedia environment to tell stories?
Thanks, Sue. Room for multimedia, and for those of you taking project-based stuff, you have the new program, right?
Well, we changed the name of our program
Okay.
to be nonfiction multimedia. And thanks, Sue, for the question. That's something that we're wanting to really explore, and understanding that at MacArthur, the media program used to be organized into television and radio, and we realized several years ago that was not really a significant, a meaningful way of organizing the work, and I think that's only intensified exponentially. And so, in the opportunity that we have now to form new relationships with organizations that will support the artists, the filmmakers, the journalists, we're asking those groups, we're challenging those groups and thinking about those groups as very intentionally working in a multimedia way. And so, but that's, that also completely makes it's a much larger universe of creators, as you know very well. So that's a challenge, but it's a wonderful opportunity, and so we're looking at that very intently, I think.
And Erica, you've been doing multimedia, for a bit.
And I was going to say, we've worked with AIR on some of their projects as well, and I think the questions around sustainability for an organization. I mean, our organization, as I've described, is very specific to public broadcast, as our major funder has dictated. We have pushed the boundaries over time. Over many years, we had first gaming projects for public media, online series for public media, and they're catching up. I think we have to sort of take a cue from our major distributor, and as they are catching up, for us also to find opportunities, but it's about sustainability for our organization as well. What do we have the expertise to do? What actually can we continue to raise funds, either internally from CPB or others, to continue to support the field? And I think that's the one we're grappling with now, but we've made some headway in dabbling on specific projects, or again, being able to open a digital open call for the first time in a wide way instead of a piloted way is actually a big boon for us, and hoping that it gets widely distributed on a public media platform, which is our goal, is actually kind of in the direction we're going.
Please, one more? Okay.
So two projects come to mind, or two thoughts come to mind. One is we very intentionally, in the current sort of evolution of Stories of Change with Sundance, broadened to go from documentary to include New Frontier and feature films. And I think the intent is we want to go as broad as Sundance wants to go, because wherever the artists are, however they're telling the stories that's the most compelling, we want to be there and leveraging that towards the impact. And then the other thing that I'll share, just because it's exciting to me, is when we do work with journalists and with broadcasters, we're really looking to build awareness that there are solutions to the big issues, and we're trying to get the broadest possible reach, which until recently I didn't really see happening through digital and sort of social media channels as much as through broadcast, even though things are shifting. So we have a new pilot partnership with BBC, who only recently started being more comfortable with having foundations as sponsors. And we have a series that's rolling out digitally over about 5 weeks into it now, and about 3 more weeks left, and then there'll be a broadcast version. But it was originally a 4-minute piece, but then they did a 1-minute version of it. They decided kind of at the last minute, well, they would also do a 1-minute version for Facebook. And yesterday, the 1-minute piece that was on food waste and different sort of innovators that are changing the status quo in food waste reached 800,000 people just on their Facebook page between when they launched it yesterday morning and when I checked last night. And so to me, that's game-changing, that there's that kind of social media reach just on Facebook. And they have so many other platforms. And then there are all the local, because local language services was a big part of the reason that we did this partnership, was to understand how localized content could work. And so we've got all these different language services that are rolling out in their language as well on all their platforms.
Great. Let's get time. We have time for like 2 more questions. So if you haven't asked a question yet, come on. Yeah, please. One, Mary, help me, wherever.
Hi, this is Kate from Apple Shop again. I ask a lot of questions. I'm really excited to hear a lot more about new media and VR and these approaches, but I also really struggle with new media making right now. Being at a rural organization without access to very basic things like high-speed internet. For example, a lot of these processes for us to submit our films sometimes take 7 hours or overnight just to upload a film, and then it doesn't happen, and we do it over and over again. So some of these things kind of exclude us from certain processes just by the very nature, and that's hard for me. And VR is another one of those things that we're not prepared to even address at this point. But my question is, at Apple Shop for a very long time, they've been using media making and filmmaking as a tool to kind of communicate what's been happening in Central Appalachia. But what we've realized in the past 5 years is that we've had to take many steps back from media making and take a more holistic look at what it means to make films in Central Appalachia. And for us right now, working with digital technology, it means that there aren't schools in the area that provide this technology, so we're having to build partnerships and to develop curriculums and to develop the educational materials around it. It means that we have to get the equipment and bring it in, and we have to be the hub in these spaces. So really,
Kate, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
My
Come
question is related to that, is how are you working in holistic, like full holistic approaches to filmmaking beyond just like the production, but what certain communities might need to even begin to engage in media making? Sorry, that was so long.
Yeah. No, we get it. It was a good description and context. Sheila, you want to take that?
I can take it. I mean, I think that unfortunately the answer is we're not doing a lot because we don't have the kind of the resources and the capacity to do that kind of field building as much as I think it's critically important. We're looking at projects that are almost done. I mean, when you're talking about kind of applying for films and inability to upload and things like that, like I'm like, oh my God, I hope that wasn't with us. Like, just send me whatever you need. But it's unfortunately it's not something that is kind of in our mandate. So I'm not sure. That's good to hear.
Yeah, and I'll just say quickly that in the way that we're approaching these, getting to know the field of organizations supporting these makers, getting to make sure that we know some of the, we're really looking really intently at geographic diversity as part of that, knowing that a lot of this work that we've been engaged with has been concentrated on the coasts, but wanting to have a special eye towards the areas of the country that don't have as many resources to do this kind of work.
And the last thing I'd like to say, because we do need to wrap up, and I'm sorry for those of you who did not have a chance to ask your questions, but folks have agreed to stay for a little bit afterwards as we break into the breakouts to speak with them. But something that's really inspired me from Kate's question and from everything everyone's been saying is that back in the proverbial day when the internet was first starting, I was lucky enough to be working at the Bay Area Video Coalition, and we kind of moved with the times and started realizing that documentary filmmakers, were not really thinking of the internet as a place to make work. And we knew that we had to do something about that. And we went to the filmmakers were just literally coming to me saying, Wendy, I'm a storyteller. I don't need a website, let alone Facebook. They hated it. And so to help change the game and to help storytellers innovate, we went to the MacArthur Foundation, and Elspeth was before Lauren was there, and Elspeth Revere, who's the outgoing vice president, said she put us through the ringer. We had to go back to Chicago 3 or 4 times to defend why BAVAC for this and why now. And they funded us for 6 years to do the Producers Institute for New Media Technologies. A number of you have been through it. Some incredible projects were launched, and we help kind of shift thinking. At the end of it was a 10-day residency for filmmakers and technologists to work together. We brought the funders together on the last day to hear project presentations. This was for when a website cost $100,000 to make. Do you know what I mean? Like, you wanted a little interactivity, you wanted a map. I mean, there was no tools that there are right now. And so we would incubate these projects, and then we would bring the funders together after the presentations. And Elspeth was in the circle, and she said, Wendy, and I said, we need to fund this work. We can't incubate it and not fund it. And how are we going to keep this incubation going and to really cultivate this work? And Elspeth said, Wendy, we love what you're doing here, but we're not there yet as a foundation. We're not ready to fund interactive websites. We have no idea what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. And we kept talking about it. And I made a pretty impassioned play for that we can't continue incubating unless there's going to be a little bit more to help these storytellers on the internet. And that year, she funded 3 projects at the $50,000 level because it was necessary. And I think your question speaks to maybe a gap that if people aren't addressing it now, it doesn't mean they don't want to and see the need. And I think the more that we can gather in community like this, not in competition, as Pam was suggesting, but in collaboration, we can, there's going to be the next stride and the next stride. But it's up to us. There's no answer here or there. It's definitely from what we're doing here together. And I want to thank this panel for being here. That was really wonderful. And thanks all of you.